We're joined now by our first guest this morning, Peter Schiff, CEO of Euro Pacific Capital, and he joins us live from Stamford, Connecticut. Peter, it's been way too long. Welcome to the program. Listen, the U.S. markets seem to be, the best game in town at this point. You can't argue with that. Yesterday, we had a guest saying that Paul Gamble saying that the U.S. market is overvalued, overinflated, and due for a massive correction. I suppose you're not going to be arguing with that prognosis, are you?
Well, you're right. It is a game, and you can play it for a while until the music stops. You mentioned the big jump in construction spending, but what you didn't mention is that it's due to a 19% increase in government spending on construction. So, where's the government getting all that money? It's borrowing it. By the way, the official U.S. national debt just went through $18 trillion yesterday, and nobody seemed to notice that.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I think that went fairly well underreported, you'd have to say. Peter, look, let me ask you about, given you're, I guess, fairly sceptical about some of the numbers that are out there on the market at the moment, what are your thoughts on the auto sales numbers? I mean, clearly we have had very sharp falls coming through in the oil price. As Adam and I were talking about earlier, this acts really like a tax cut. However, you'd have to imagine that it probably wouldn't filter through into the auto market quite as quickly.
Yeah, well, it might influence somebody's decision about whether they buy, a more fuel-efficient automobile or not. But I don't think the gas price reduction is permanent. I think this is just a temporary. And, of course, a lot of Americans don't work anymore, so they don't have to drive back and forth to work, so they don't save as much money when the gas price goes down as they used to. If you want to look at the data that people are ignoring, look at the horrible Christmas or holiday shopping sales over the 4-day Thanksgiving weekend. Sales were down about 11% from the prior year. We just had a 50% drop in the growth of Cyber Monday sales. It was the worst Cyber Monday since 2009. And yet everybody is glossing over this huge collapse in consumer spending, and they think that consumers have, for some reason, suddenly decided they don't want deals. They don't want to shop on Black Friday or Cyber Monday. They're just going to wait it out and pay higher prices because the economy is so strong that they don't need a deal anymore. And I think this is wishful thinking at best. People are turning a blind eye to this data because they want to hold on to the phony narrative of an economic recovery, but these weak holiday sales numbers, which I don't believe will improve between now and the end of the year, show that the recovery is more fantasy than reality.
Speaking about fantasy, what about, where you think interest rates are going to be headed for next year? Because, a lot of economists say that the U.S. economy is enough to withstand a rate rise. But if you've just painted that picture, Peter, it doesn't sound like the Fed could ever increase interest rates. Because if we're not getting enough traction from all the quantitative easing that's been in the system for the last 5-6 years, how could they ever raise rates?
Yeah, well, that's the point. This bubble is too big to pop. And even a small increase in interest rates would pop it. And, it's the government that's over-leveraged, corporate America, households. We talked a little bit ago about auto sales. Well, why are so many Americans buying cars? Because the government is financing all these auto loans. And you've got a lot of subprime lending going on in the auto market, just like you had in the housing market. We are leveraged to the max. The fact that anybody can believe that the Fed could raise interest rates and not prick this bubble, it just shows you how delusional people are. But, remember, the same people who have confidence in the U.S. economy today had similar confidence back in 2007. They didn't see this gigantic financial crisis coming, and they're just as blind to an even larger one that's looming on the horizon now.
Well, Peter, talk to us about jobs. You related this back to the oil price, to the auto sales. People aren't driving as much because they're out of work. What do you make of this improvement that we have been seeing in the unemployment rate and the non-farm payrolls numbers? Because we've got a big number due out, of course, at the end of the week.
Yes, well, I think two things happened in 2014 that helped reduce the unemployment rate. One is that the long-term unemployed who had been collecting unemployment benefits, extended benefits, those benefits were taken away at the end of last year. And so I think people took a lot of jobs that in prior years they were turning down. A lot of low-paying part-time jobs. They were holding off for better jobs, but they threw in the towel and they took these lousy jobs. So that's one thing. And also I think a lot of older people who are retired are being forced out of retirement by a rising cost of living and 0% interest rates, so they're taking some part-time jobs. They can pay their electric bills. So that's what's going on. Plus, you're having a lot of younger people who are leaving the labor market. They're just living with their parents. They don't have jobs. And so that's why the unemployment rate is going down. But I think you're going to see an upturn in the unemployment rate next year, because I think a lot of employers have been holding on to their workers because they've been conned into believing there's a recovery around the corner. And so they've been waiting for it. But when they find out that it's a mirage, I think you're going to see a lot of layoffs, and I think that unemployment number is going to start to edge back up in 2015, which is another reason why the Fed's not going to raise rates, why they're going to do another round of quantitative easing instead.
So Peter, what's the number? What sort of number are you looking for on Friday?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, they're looking for like 230,000 jobs. But again, they never look at the quality of the types of jobs. I mean, generally we destroy high-paying full-time jobs and we replace them with low-paying part-time jobs, service sector type jobs. So the real number doesn't matter. It's the quality of the jobs, not the quantity. But at some point we're going to have a big collapse in the number of jobs that we're creating, whether we're going to find it on Friday or whether we're going to have to wait another month or two. But I think this string of 200,000 plus jobs is going to break, and I think we're going to start to eventually lose jobs, and we're going to see the unemployment rate begin to rise.
Okay. All right, Peter, always great to have you with us on the show. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.